welcome to another episode of the Experience Better video podcast series. I'm Josh Beekler, a PT.
I'm Adam Lease, a physical therapist.
So, we're kind of in the midst of football season, and we're starting to see a lot of concussions. So where you're dual credentialed as a physical therapist and an athletic trainer, you have some expertise in this area.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about what happens through a concussion process.
Sure. So, concussion, is kind of a hot button issue here lately. This last weekend, Maurice Washington, that's what we suspect.
May or may not have had, but probably.
A suspected head injury,
right.
More than likely a concussion. And so what a concussion is it's a traumatic blow to the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And so they used to grade them, there used to be like a mild concussion,
Sure.
a moderate concussion, severe concussion. That's no longer the case. Now it's a concussion is a concussion.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a couple different ways that you can get a concussion. Typically it's a blow to the head, but there's two different mechanisms of action. So either the brain, when you hit your head, it continues forward and hits the skull, or the brain goes the opposite way. So it's either like a coup or a counter coup type of force, which doesn't mean a whole lot to most people, but
Sure.
That's the way that the brain is actually injured. It hits the inside of your skull, and then there's damage right there.
Mm-hmm.
So typically, you think of concussion, you have a headache. You might have a little bit of like fogginess or just like not quite feeling right.
Sure.
You might just feel like you're, just can't remember things correctly, or just things are coming slower to you. Another like episode that people have, or a common symptom that people have, is emotional distress.
Mm-hmm.
Like you could be like a super stoic guy, and all of a sudden like you're like crying for no reason in the middle of a football game. And it's like that's just pretty
Unlike
atypical.
them,
Yeah. And so those are things that you look out for. There's a couple different standardized concussion assessment tools that people use, like for sideline. So like an athletic trainer on the sideline, they go through a series of questions, and like the SCAT is the most common standardized concussion assessment tool. I think it's up to the SCAT 5 now. And so it's just a list of questions that they ask them, and it's supposed to kind of cue you into if they have a suspected concussion or not. Another one that a lot of people use is an impact testing, and what that is, it's a lot of they test your reaction times. Different symbols pop up, and you have to click on them, or you have to try to draw a shape. And what that does is you get a baseline before the season, and then after a suspected concussion or a suspected head injury, then you retake that, and it's supposed to be within a certain percentage that they say that this is likely a concussion because you have delayed response time or difficulty with these tasks.
So most athletes do some pre-testing ahead of the season, so you have that baseline measure, and then that way you can compare it to, because you and I are probably going to have different scores on that test.
Definitely,
But you're essentially testing against yourself, not against...
Yeah, it's not like a standardized score like,
right.
say, like an ACT or, like a test based out of 100%. So you're going against yourself, just like you said.
Sure.
And so you have a suspected head injury. Typically, the athletic trainer knows the kid, so you're able to pick up on things, or the coach notices things, or even the referees. Like I know that going to a couple high school football games, if there's a pretty hard hit, the ref will ask the kid a couple questions just to make sure, because that's a new legislation that they have to remove the kid immediately, or otherwise the coach could be held liable if something would happen.
Right.
And so they're taken off to the sideline. If they suspect that there is a concussion or something's not right, they take them out of the game. So like that's like Maurice Washington didn't play the whole second half this past weekend.
Right.
So a suspected head injury, then they have to go through a standardized, they call it concussion protocol. You hear about this in the NFL. Usually it's a 5 or 6 day process, and you have to be symptom free. And so the first day it starts the day after the competition. If you have no symptoms, so that'd be no headache, no reactivity to light or sensitivity to light or sound or emotional stimulus, things like that. They have to be pretty much back to normal, just in their daily routine, without any exercise, without any physical contact. They pass that, they go on to the next day, which is like a light activity phase. So that'd be like riding a bike for 10 minutes or 20 minutes is the usual standard. If you pass that, you have no increased headaches, no sensitivity, no symptoms the rest of the day. You go on to the next thing, which is like sport-specific activities. So then you're doing running, jumping, cutting, no contact yet. And then again, if you fail, quote unquote, fail the day, you have increased symptoms. You would have a return of your headache, return of sensitivity of light, and then you repeat that same day the next day.
Sure. Yep.
So then you could get cleared in 5 days, return to full contact, no symptoms, come back, then you're good to go play the next week or the next day, next 2 days, whenever it is.
Sure. So they have to get through those 4 or 5 stages of
Yep.
activity, and they could get stuck at one for really any amount of time.
Yep. Yeah. There's no right or wrong. They say that typically, like, the younger the person is, the slower you should return them to play. And so say you're a freshman in high school and you get hit in the head, have a concussion, not uncommon to be out 2, 3, 4
Right.
weeks or
Just for
even longer.
safety
Just
Yeah.
and so that way, I mean, you're young, you need to let your brain heal.
Mm-hmm.
So the older guys, people who are in college and the NFL, they say the brain doesn't fully mature until age 25. So some of them are that age, some of them
Sure.
aren't, and so it's very important to let that brain heal. It's just like any other muscle or any other body part. You can't just continually let it get abused.
Mm-hmm.
So
Very good.
yeah, so hopefully Maurice is cleared for this weekend.
Absolutely,
big
yeah.
game.
Absolutely.
Big game.
Very good. Well, thanks for telling us a little bit about the concussion and what the protocols are and what that means and how they go through. So you got any predictions? We got big Ohio State game. Game day is going to be here.
Game day in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Yeah.
First time in 11 years since
Been a while,
2008.
2007 or 8, I think it was.
USC, and we got spanked. So
We did. Hopefully not a repeat of that.
hopefully we buck that trend. Yeah.
You got a prediction, or what do you think?
I think it's going to be a closer game than people are realizing it. I think that a lot of people are picking Ohio State to win pretty big.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Ohio State's ultimately going to win the game. I'll say 45-35 Ohio State, unfortunately.
That's too bad. So yeah,
What do you think?
I don't know. I think maybe they'll with our kicking woes, maybe they'll say that Nebraska field goals are worth like 15 points or something. So if that happens, I think we got a shot.
You bet.
Otherwise, I think it's going to be. I think we're going to come up a little short, but.
What's your score prediction?
Let's
Gotta give us one.
say 42-29.
42-29. Go for 2?
Maybe, once or twice. Yeah.
All right.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.